The biker laughed, loud, arrogant, and careless. Then he said it, an insult aimed directly at Keanu Reeves' wife. The sound of his voice cut through the cafe, like broken glass. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze above plates. Even the music seemed quieter, as if the room itself had felt the shift. Keanu Reeves slowly turned his head. He didn't react the way people expected. No anger. No shouting. No sudden movement. Just silence. The biker leaned back in his chair, smirking, clearly enjoying the attention. He thought he'd found an easy target. A quiet man, dressed simply, sitting peacefully with his wife. To him, calm looked like weakness. Respect looked like fear. Keanu stood up. Slowly. Not rushed. Not tense. Every eye in the cafe followed him. The biker chuckled. Relax, man. It's just a joke. Keanu didn't smile. He didn't clench his fists. He looked directly at the biker and said one word, calm, steady, unmistakable. Apologize. The biker burst out laughing. Loud enough to make sure everyone heard it. Or what, he mocked. That's when something changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But unmistakably. The air felt heavier. The room felt smaller. Keanu took one quiet step forward. Just one. People closest to them instinctively moved back, creating space without realizing why. Someone whispered his name under their breath. Another person reached for their phone, sensing that whatever came next would not be ordinary. The biker's smile began to falter, just slightly. For the first time, he noticed Keanu's eyes. Calm, focused, unafraid. Not the look of a man looking for a fight, but the look of someone who had already won. Keanu spoke again, his voice low but clear. You don't speak to her like that. No threats. No raised voice. Yet somehow, it landed harder than a punch. The biker opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. In that exact second, everyone in the cafe felt it. The shift. The moment when arrogance meets something stronger than violence. The biker had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. And Keanu Reeves had just made it very clear. This wasn't going to end the way he thought it would. The cafe sat just off the highway, the kind of place bikers used as a stop between long rides. The walls were lined with road signs, old helmets, and faded photos of motorcycle clubs, posing proudly in leather jackets. Engines growled outside, music thumped softly inside, and the smell of coffee mixed with fuel and fried food hung in the air. This was the biker's territory. He'd been there for hours, surrounded by a small group that laughed a little too hard at his jokes and nodded at everything he said. His voice carried across the room, sharp and dominant, designed to pull attention toward him. He fed on that attention. The louder he was, the bigger he felt. Then Keanu Reeves and his wife walked in. No security, no announcement, no celebrity energy. Just two people entering quietly, holding hands, choosing a table in the corner. Keanu smiled politely at the server, thanked her by name, and pulled out a chair for his wife. They spoke softly, sharing a quiet moment that felt completely out of place in a room built on noise and intimidation. And that was exactly what caught the biker's attention. He noticed the calm first, then the lack of fear, then the fact that no one was trying to impress him. To the biker, silence meant submission. Humility meant weakness. And anyone who didn't react to him clearly didn't deserve respect. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he watched Keanu laugh, gently with his wife. Something about it irritated him, the ease, the confidence that didn't need approval. The biker felt challenged, not by words, but by the absence of them. Around the cafe, others had already started to recognize Keanu. Whispers moved quietly between tables. Phones stayed down, out of respect, not fear. No one wanted to disturb the calm bubble Keanu and his wife seemed to carry with them. But the biker didn't recognize boundaries. He stood up, swaggering across the cafe, boots heavy against the floor. His friends fell silent, watching. Some looked uneasy, sensing trouble. Others smirked, expecting entertainment. Keanu noticed him approach but didn't react. He stayed seated, shoulders relaxed, attention still on his wife. That calm, the refusal to acknowledge intimidation, only fueled the biker's ego. When the biker finally spoke, he did it loudly. Too loudly. That's when the room froze. Keanu's wife shifted uncomfortably. The server stopped walking. Even the music felt distant. What the biker thought was dominance was actually insecurity. A desperate need to prove he mattered in a room where someone else's quiet presence had taken control without effort. Keanu slowly placed his cup down. The sound was soft, but deliberate. He looked up, not with anger, not with hatred, but with clarity. That was the moment the biker misread everything. He thought the calm man standing up now was finally reacting out of fear or embarrassment. He didn't understand that this wasn't a reaction at all. It was a decision to draw a line, a decision to protect, a decision that would change the entire room. And everyone watching felt it, because when someone who is truly calm finally stands up, it's never impulsive. It's intentional. And whatever came next was no longer about a biker, a cafe, or an insult. It was about dignity, and the quiet power of knowing exactly who you are. The biker's laugh echoed a little too long. It was the kind of laugh meant to dominate a room. Loud, careless, performative. But this time, it didn't land the way he expected. Keanu Reeves stood there calmly, his chair pushed back just enough to show intention, not aggression. His posture was relaxed, but grounded. The stance of someone who wasn't bluffing, yet had no need to prove anything. "Relax, man," the biker scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "It's a public place. People talk." Keanu didn't respond immediately. He looked at his wife first, checked her expression, made sure she was okay. That simple act, prioritizing her comfort over his own pride, shifted something in the room. Then Keanu turned back to the biker. "You don't speak to her like that," he said again. "Calm, clear, final." The biker stepped closer, invading personal space, chest puffed out, voice rising. "And what are you going to do if I do?" The cafe felt smaller now. Walls closer, air heavier. People nearby instinctively leaned away. No one wanted to be caught between whatever was happening. Not because they expected violence, but because something about this felt serious. Different. Keanu didn't move back. Didn't step forward either. He simply held eye contact. That unnerved the biker more than anger ever could. There was no fear to feed off. No insecurity to exploit. Just a steady gaze that reflected the biker's own behavior back at him. Stripped of bravado. "You want respect," Keanu said quietly. "Start with an apology." The biker barked out a laugh, but it sounded thinner this time. Forced. "Apologize? To who?" "To her," Keanu replied. The room went silent again. This wasn't a challenge anymore. It was a boundary. The biker glanced around, expecting support, a laugh, a nod, something. But his friends weren't smiling now. The bar owner had stopped cleaning glasses. Even strangers were watching him closely. For the first time, the biker realized the spotlight had turned, and not in his favor. Still, pride is a stubborn thing. He straightened, sneering. "You think because you're famous, you can tell me what to do?" Keanu shook his head slightly. "This has nothing to do with fame," he said. "It's about basic respect." That word hit harder than expected. Respect. The biker shifted his weight, suddenly unsure. He hadn't planned for this. For calm resistance, for quiet authority, for a room that no longer felt like his. Keanu took one small step closer. Not threatening, not aggressive, just enough to make his presence undeniable. "I'm giving you a chance," Keanu said. "Take it." Seconds passed. Long ones. The biker's jaw clenched. His instinct screamed to push back, to reclaim dominance. But something stopped him. The eyes watching, the silence pressing down, the sudden realization that aggression here would only make him smaller. He muttered something under his breath. Not quite an apology. Not quite defiance. But it wasn't enough. Keanu didn't raise his voice. Didn't escalate. He simply stayed there, steady, patient, unmovable. And that's when the biker understood something too late. This man wasn't trying to win a fight. He was ending one. The cafe held its breath. Everyone felt it. The moment when ego meets consequence, when loudness collapses under calm. Whatever the biker chose next would define him. Not just here, but in front of everyone watching. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control anymore. Silence has weight. And in that cafe, It pressed down on everyone like a held breath. The biker felt it first. Moments ago, he'd been the loudest presence in the room. Jokes flying, ego inflated, voice bouncing off the walls. Now, the same walls seemed to lean inward, closing ranks against him. No one laughed. No one looked away. Every eye was fixed on him. Keanu Reeves hadn't moved. That was the most unsettling part. He stood there with the same calm posture, shoulders relaxed, hands visible, expression unreadable. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't posturing. He was simply present. And that presence spoke louder than shouting ever could. "Man, you're making this a bigger deal than it is," the biker finally said, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. It was just words. Keanu tilted his head slightly, considering him. Not judging, not angry. Just evaluating. "Words matter," he replied, "especially when they're meant to humiliate." The biker scoffed, but his voice cracked just enough to give him away. He glanced toward the door, then back to his friends. They weren't backing him up. One stared into his drink. Another checked his phone like it suddenly became urgent. The bar owner stepped forward slightly, drying a glass with deliberate slowness. Not intervening, just making himself visible. A quiet reminder that this wasn't the biker's territory anymore. Keanu noticed everything. He always did. He turned briefly to his wife, offering a soft nod, a silent question. She gave a small smile in return. Not shaken, not afraid, just ready to leave if needed. That exchange shifted the atmosphere again. This wasn't a man driven by rage. This was a husband setting a standard. "You don't have to be like this," Keanu said, returning his attention to the biker. "You can walk away. You can apologize. This ends quietly." The biker swallowed. His pride screamed at him to push back, to regain control. But something deeper, something instinctive, told him he was standing at a line he shouldn't cross. People had started whispering now. Soft, cautious murmurs. "Is that? Yeah, I think it is." "No way." Recognition spread like a ripple. The biker caught fragments of it. His eyes widened slightly as the realization dawned. Not just who Keanu was, but what that meant. Not fame. Not money. Reputation. A man known for humility. For kindness. For never escalating situations, but never backing down from what mattered. The biker's jaw tightened. "You think this makes you better than me?" he snapped, though the fire was fading. Keanu shook his head again. "No, but it does mean I won't tolerate disrespect." Another pause. This one felt different. The biker exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. His shoulders dropped, just a little. The performance was cracking. "Fine," he muttered. "Whatever." Keanu didn't move. Didn't accept it. "Say it properly," he said. Not harsh. Firm. The biker looked at Keanu's wife. Then at the floor. Then back up. "I shouldn't have said that," he said stiffly. "Sorry." It wasn't graceful. It wasn't heartfelt. But it was enough. The room exhaled. Keanu nodded once. "Thank you." No victory speech. No smug smile. Just acknowledgement. He turned to leave, placing a gentle hand on his wife's back. As they walked toward the door, conversation slowly resumed, though at a lower volume, like people coming down from a shared moment they didn't quite know how to process. But the biker stayed frozen in place, because the real consequence hadn't arrived yet. As Keanu reached the door, the bar owner spoke up. "Sir," he said, looking directly at the biker, "I think it's time you and your friends head out." The biker spun around. "What? He's leaving?" "Yes," the owner replied calmly. "And so are you." A few patrons nodded in agreement. The biker opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. There was no ground left to stand on. No audience. No support. He grabbed his jacket, signaling to his friends. They followed without a word. As they passed Keanu outside, the biker hesitated. For a brief moment, their eyes met again. Keanu said nothing. He didn't need to. The biker looked away first. And as the door closed behind them, one thing was clear to everyone who had witnessed it. No punches were thrown. No threats were made. Yet one man walked out smaller than he entered, and the other left exactly as he was. The door closed with a dull thud. Not loud. Not dramatic. But it echoed anyway. Inside the cafe, no one spoke for a full 5 seconds. It felt like the world had paused, unsure whether it was allowed to move again. Then someone exhaled, long and shaky, and the spell broke. That was intense. A woman near the window whispered. The bar owner set the glass down carefully, as if sudden movements might disturb whatever balance had just been restored. "Drinks are on the house for a minute," he said. "Not as a reward, more like a collective decompression." Keanu and his wife stepped onto the sidewalk, the late afternoon sun washing over them. The air outside felt different. Lighter. Quieter. "You okay?" Keanu asked softly. She nodded. "Yeah, I am. Thank you." He gave a small smile. "Always." They began to walk, not in a hurry. No security rushing in. No crowd chasing them. Just two people moving forward, leaving something behind without dragging it along. Behind them, inside the cafe, phones had already come out. Not during the confrontation. No one had dared. But now people were replaying it in their heads, realizing what they'd just witnessed. A young man at the counter typed furiously, his fingers flying. Just watched Keanu Reeves calmly shut down a biker who insulted his wife. No yelling, no ego, just presence. Another patron snapped a photo of the empty doorway, adding, "This man defines class." Within minutes, the story began to spread. Across the street, the biker stood beside his motorcycle, helmet dangling from his fingers. His friends hovered nearby, awkward and silent. The bravado he'd walked in with was gone, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. Embarrassment. Not the loud kind. The quiet, gnawing kind that settles in your chest and doesn't let go. "Man," one of his friends muttered. That was Keanu Reeves. The biker didn't answer. Another shook his head. "You really didn't recognize him?" "I wasn't looking." The biker snapped, then immediately softened. "I don't know. I just wasn't thinking." His reflection stared back at him from the chrome of his bike. Same jacket, same patches, same face. But it felt different now, because the moment kept replaying, not the apology, not the crowd, but the way Keanu had looked at him. Not with anger, with disappointment. That was worse. They rode off soon after, engines roaring louder than necessary, cutting through traffic like they were trying to outrun something. But you can't outrun a realization. That evening, the video surfaced. Someone had filmed the last few seconds, just enough. Keanu standing calmly. The biker stiff and defensive. The bar owner stepping in. No context. No shouting. Just contrast. The internet did the rest. Comments poured in by the thousands. This is how a real man handles disrespect. Notice how he protects without escalating. Strength doesn't need volume. By morning, it was everywhere. Blogs picked it up. Reaction channels broke it down frame by frame. People weren't debating who was right. That was obvious. They were talking about how it was handled. Keanu didn't respond. He never did. But the biker saw it all. He sat alone in his garage, phone glowing in the dim light, scrolling until his thumb ached. He watched the clip again. And again. Every time, he noticed something new. The patience. The invitation to walk away. The moment he'd been offered dignity, and almost thrown it away. He set the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I didn't win anything," he muttered to the empty space. For the first time in a long while, he wondered why he'd felt the need to tear someone else down in the first place. 2 days later, a small post appeared online. No username anyone recognized. No tags. No attempt to go viral. Just words. "I was the guy in that video. I was wrong. I disrespected someone who didn't deserve it, and I embarrassed myself in the process. He gave me a chance to end it the right way, and I barely took it. I'm working on being better." Most people never saw it, but the ones who did noticed something rare. Accountability. Meanwhile, life went on. Keanu and his wife returned to their routine. Morning coffee. Quiet walks. Normalcy. The incident wasn't a story they told. It was something they'd already released. But its impact lingered elsewhere. In that cafe, a small sign appeared near the door. "Respect everyone. Always." No explanation. None needed. Because sometimes the loudest lessons are taught without raising your voice. And the biggest changes begin in the silence after the moment passes. A week passed. The internet moved on, as it always does. New outrage. New heroes. New villains. The clip faded from trending lists, buried beneath the noise of everything else demanding attention. But not everyone forgot. The biker hadn't ridden past that cafe since the incident. Not because he was banned. No one had said he couldn't return, but because something in him resisted going back unchanged. He spent more time alone that week. Less noise. Fewer rides. More thinking than he was used to. Every time his thoughts drifted, they circled back to the same image. Keanu Reeves standing calmly in front of him, offering an exit. Not out of fear, but out of principle. You don't have to be like this. The words replayed again and again. They weren't a threat. They weren't a challenge. They were an invitation. And that's what unsettled him most. On the other side of town, Keanu sat on a park bench, coffee cooling in his hands. Mornings were his favorite, before the world demanded anything from him. A passerby nodded politely, recognition flickering and fading without fanfare. He appreciated that. "You handled that well," his wife said, joining him. He shrugged lightly. "I handled it how I hoped someone would handle it for us." She smiled. "You gave him a chance." "That's all anyone ever needs," he replied. "A chance to choose better." They sat in silence, watching a dog chase pigeons across the grass. No lingering tension. No replaying the past. Some moments are meant to be acknowledged, not relived. Midweek, the biker found himself stopping his bike a few blocks away from the cafe. He didn't know why. The engine ticked as it cooled, the sound loud in the quiet street. He removed his helmet and stared at the door in the distance. "What am I even doing here?" he thought. He wasn't there to start anything. That much was clear. After a long moment, he turned the bike around and left. But something shifted. Friday afternoon, he volunteered to help his sister move. Normally, he'd make an excuse. This time, he showed up early. "Didn't expect you so soon," she said, surprised. "Figured I'd help," he replied. She studied him for a moment. "You okay?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm trying." It felt strange to say. Vulnerable, honest, but also relieving. That same evening, Keanu received a handwritten letter at a small production office he occasionally used. No return address. Inside, the message was short. "You didn't have to treat me with respect that day. I didn't earn it, but you did anyway. I won't forget that." Keanu read it once. Then again. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Not everyone grows in public. Some growth happens quietly, off camera, when no one is watching. The cafe owner noticed the difference too. The place felt calmer lately. Friendlier. Patrons talked more. Laughed easier. Something about that day had reset the tone, as if people had collectively remembered what kind of space they wanted to be in. One afternoon, the biker walked past. He slowed, looked inside, then kept walking. Not avoidance, just timing. Weeks later, a new customer held the door open for a stranger. Someone else apologized instead of escalating. Small things. Ordinary things. But they mattered. Because respect, once witnessed, has a way of spreading. It doesn't shout. It doesn't trend forever. It simply changes the way people choose to show up next time. And somewhere between a moment of restraint and a decision to do better, a quiet line was crossed, not by force, but by understanding. The cafe looked the same. Same tables. Same counter. Same soft clatter of cups and low conversations drifting through the room. To anyone passing by, it was just another place to stop, sit, and move on. But moments live in places long after people leave them. A young couple stood near the counter, debating what to order. An older man held the door open for a stranger without thinking twice. A waitress smiled and said no rush when someone fumbled for their wallet. Small gestures, ordinary choices, yet each one carried weight. Because respect, once witnessed, doesn't disappear. It settles quietly into the walls, into the habits of the people who pass through. Keanu never returned to that cafe. There was no reason to. For him, the moment had ended exactly where it needed to, without scars, without spectacle. He didn't replay it in interviews or turn it into a story. Some things are meant to stay private, even when others make them public. But the impact wasn't about him. It never was. Across town, the biker stood at a red light, helmet under his arm, wind tugging at his jacket. A man crossed the street slowly in front of him, dropping his keys without noticing. The biker leaned down, picked them up, and held them out. "Hey," he said, "you dropped these." The man smiled. "Thanks. Appreciate it." The light turned green. The biker waited until the man reached the sidewalk safely before riding on. He didn't think about why he did it. He just knew he would have done it differently a month ago. That's how change happens. Not in grand apologies, not in viral moments, but in the quiet space between impulse and choice. Somewhere along the way, the biker had realized something: that day wasn't about losing face. It was about gaining perspective. He had been given a moment to see himself clearly, without insults or fists or fear clouding the view. And he had taken it. Not perfectly, not instantly, but honestly. Back at the cafe, a small sign near the door caught the afternoon light. "Respect everyone. Always." People walked past it without stopping. Others paused, read it, nodded, and moved on. No one asked where it came from. They didn't need to, because the strongest lessons don't announce themselves. They linger. They wait. They show up later, when it matters. Strength isn't about who you intimidate. It's about who you protect. Influence isn't about being louder. It's about being steadier. And dignity doesn't belong to titles, fame, or reputation. It belongs to the choices you make when no one is forcing you to make them. Some stories end with applause. This one ended with something quieter, something better. A man walked away unchanged in his values. Another walked away changed in his behavior. And everyone else who witnessed it carried a piece of that moment forward, whether they realized it or not. Because the person you disrespect today might be the one who shows you who you could become tomorrow. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is choose respect, even when no one expects it.